Hey everybody, welcome to New Dramatists and to New Dramatists in Conversation. I'm Emily Morse, Artistic Director of New Dramatists, a 73-year-old artistic home and laboratory for playwrights. Dedicated to the playwright, the mission of this organization is to serve and advocate for the individual and collective interests of a diverse, eclectic company of about 59 visionary playwrights. Each company member is offered a self-guided 7-year residency for free. And in that time, their creative, artistic process investigations are supported with access to space, time, leadership opportunities, as well as a vibrant company of peer playwrights and other collaborating artists. Today, we are very fortunate to have Mia Chung, playwright and New Dramatist alum, class of 2018, and John Steber, New Dramatist director of the Playwrights Lab, here to discuss Mia's play, Catch as Catch Can, produced by P73 in 2018, Steppenwolf in 2020, and Playwrights Horizons this past November 2022. In case you're wondering, yes, John and Mia are together in person on site at New Dramatists. I'm very jealous, but we're very happy to see them in this beautiful space. To achieve this, ample COVID safety precautions were taken, including installing UV lights and air purifiers in what we call our studio. Plus, the windows are open for fresh air circulation. And Mia and John cleared our daily health screener, took rapid tests before arriving on site today, and they're socially distanced, but they are together. It's so lovely to see them. And that's Joanne Jacobson hanging on the wall back there, kind of overseeing this afternoon's event. So I've asked John and Mia to discuss their work together during Mia's residency, and specifically her use of resources and intentional approach to the building and making of Catch as Catch Can, and how casting played a central dramaturgical role in the development of this particular play. As I was preparing this welcome last night, I went into the Catch as Catch Can folder, and yes, this project has its own folder, and counted, I think, 17 readings of this play between October 2015 and May 2018, and they might correct me on those numbers, but that's what I saw in a quick account. New Dramatists in Conversation focuses on playwrights and theater makers and how they make their work. These are the stories we don't often hear, let alone witness, and because that's what we do at New Dramatists, support process, the question we often ask is, how can we open up that work, the process, to an audience? So these kinds of conversations are one way we can do that. So today we'll talk for about 45 minutes and have about 10 minutes at the end to address questions. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started here. Each play is born of a different impulse. Each play of each playwright is born of a different impulse. So let's start there. And as they unmask, look at those beautiful faces. Hi guys, wave at everyone. We're going to ask you, Mia, if you can share a little bit about the impulse from which Catch as Catch Can sprung, and then I'll just hand it over and you and John carry us through the afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks,
you remember the question? Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to actually focus on the origin story of the development process.
Okay.
And then if we have time, we can talk about the origin of the play, but there are various places and podcasts, whatever, where I've talked about that. And I don't think that's the most interesting thing to talk about with regard to New Dramatists and John Steber. So the development of the play, I had I was invited to do a one act with Labyrinth Theater Company to interview 2 of their actors and write a one act for them. So that's actually where I found a version of the character doubling. But we can go into it later if we have time, but that I actually did it wrong during that. I mean, what I consider incorrectly. But from that experience, I had about a 30-page one act. And I was really interested in the character doubling. And I wanted to pursue that more. I was trying to figure it out. And that was in, I believe it was March or April of 2014. Okay. I sort of kicked that around, tried to write various things. I came up with all sorts of possible storylines and characters, but I knew it was not right, worked on other things. And then I was at the time a Huntington playwriting fellow up in Boston. And they have, and I hope still have, an amazing summer workshop. It's about 2 weeks. Where you can bring a play and workshop it with actors and a director, and there's a reading at the end. And there's various iterations of this all around the world, frankly. But that one, usually, my understanding is that generally speaking, they would you would submit. The playwriting fellows would submit. It's like it's not necessarily open to everyone, but it's open to the playwriting fellows. And they have a number of them over many years. And you would submit a full draft of the play. Well, I didn't have a full draft of this play. I had this one act. I knew that the first scene, which is largely, much of it is in the final or the current final draft of Catch as Catch Can. But the rest of it, I was sort of like not really wedded to. But I had this one act, and I had a lot of ideas of what more it could contain from this launch pad of the character doubling and this context of an Irish American family and an Italian American family that grew up together, working class family in the New England area. So I submitted it because, you just have this, this automatic reflex as a playwright of applying to everything, even though you are telling yourself, it's like the constant war of like, you're like, well, they're never gonna pick this, or it's not complete, there's no way. And then like, let them say no, it's the constant war. So I submitted it, and lo and behold, they selected it for the workshop. And they said to me, usually we want things that are complete or have a full draft, and then you can work on revising it. It's like a step towards production. And they said, but, we're interested, and, do as much work as you can before. And of course, I vowed to have a complete draft. And then it came time to select, to invite a director. And I did, I forgot this, but I remembered as I was preparing for this conversation that we did in fact invite someone local to New England to direct it. Someone that I didn't know. I liked the work, but I didn't know it all. I knew one play that was directed. And I, in some ways, lots of respect for that director, distant, because I still don't know the director, but it's such a lucky stroke that they were not available. And so there were other names tossed around. And then I don't know, it was some lucky instinct or it was fate that I kind of took myself in. And in fact, probably because I didn't have a full draft. So I felt very unarmored. I felt very vulnerable. I felt very like, well, this workshop I vowed to have a full draft by the time of the workshop, but how many times have I broken those vows? Like 99% of the time. So I think because of that, I thought to myself, who do I want to be there in the room, who knows me, who I know, and is, and I actually don't know that I articulated it even as much as I did now. It was pure instinct. I reached out to you And I mean, you have a full-time job, so I did not think necessarily that it would happen. But of course, I asked you, and it was during the summer. It was in July of 2015, and you know, you and Emily and whoever else was involved worked it out so that you were able to come, and of course Robert and your family,
Right.
so that you were able to come to Boston July 15th through the 26th in 2015. And gosh, I have to say that that is the origin story for this play that I return to so often, and that I return to so often in the development process. Because during that 2-week process, I wrote a draft of this play. I found some of those scenes that honestly are crazy bananas, right? Because it was still in that really precious state of amorphous impulses that so often, if you rush that into a form for a reading or for to submit it to something, you might go in the wrong direction, or you might go in frankly a conventional direction that isn't right for the content, just because you want it to, like, you're preparing something to be like to go to school, and you want them to be wearing clothes, but in fact, because it was in such a amorphous state, because you were able to join, I proceeded to write the first draft of the play. That was, and it was really hard. It was so intense, and I was exhausted. But every day, because of the structure of having a director that I felt very safe with, and rehearsal, I think it was like every day.
Yeah.
I thought I thought that it was, I thought, oh, no. We rehearsed, sorry. It was actually 6 days of rehearsal spread out over 2 weeks.
Oh, right, it was every other day.
Every other day. But you and I probably had a conversation every day.
Right.
And some of those conversations I was able to say, I wrote a scene. And other conversations, I said, I am still writing, and made various promises and also lots of excuses. And the fact is, like, at all times in the process, it's like the way I would describe it is I brought new dramatists to Boston to help me work on this play, because I felt I've never actually done a workshop in this way. That's why you have to come with me to another. No, because I felt completely like at home in the creative space, in my creative space, in my imagination, to just do whatever I needed to do to get these pages out. And some of the scenes, I do remember some of the things that I wrote during that process that didn't in and of themselves make it as a scene, but they were necessary to get to the scene or scenes that they led to. I mean, there was so much there's so much content inside of me that I just needed to focus, not get distracted, which is a problem of mine, and get it out, get it onto the screen, onto the page, and then to have right away. I mean, you're just compelled. You would never, I would never show these pages to anyone except in this situation where I have to show something. So even if they suck, they exist, and you bring them into rehearsal, and then you think, tonight I'll fix those. And actually you find that there's more there. I mean, that's like I feel like that's just the creative process. And that's also like the root of things like the bake-offs. But certainly any workshop in dramatists, you feel completely safe to bring this, like, these little fragments of chromosomes And then by the end of a rehearsal period, often every time with you, I think I would often start and say, I think we may have an hour, and then I can just go and write more. But for the 6-hour rehearsal or whatever it was, we would go through and we would walk through and maybe go to earlier stuff, but we would use up all 6 hours. And by the end of it, it felt like, no time had passed. But it was very, it was a lesson to me, and it's always a lesson to me every time, that with the right collaborators, even if it feels like there's just like little fragments of chromosome, by the end, you start to feel something growing and building, and it's not all, like I haven't been wasting anyone's time.
No, that's right. Well, the thing is that even though it was 30 pages, it was 30 pages of just amazing, wonderful material. It was very complicated. And it's one of those things where, when I read it, I was hooked immediately. Excuse me. And we had a great cast, a great bunch of actors.
We did.
The collaborators. Originally up there, we had Matt Boston,
Yeah.
Denny Dale Bess, and Mariana Basham.
Mhm.
So Mariana, we didn't know, but she was a local actor. But Matt and Denny, we knew from New York, and they came
Well,
up.
you knew. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's you and your.
Well,
brilliant cast.
together,
Yeah.
we brought them up. But the point is that there was so much material to mine. There was so much really amazing stuff to mine that, again, what we knew was that all we needed was that you needed the time to actually write, to think about the material, but also you needed to hear it, you needed to play with it, you needed to have actors who were willing to go on this journey with you. Sometimes you get a play, and sometimes I'll see a play and I go, yeah, just have the actors go home and memorize it, then we'll come back, we'll stage it, and then what do we need rehearsal?
Right.
This play was not that. This play was so much stuff. I mean, your writing is so nuanced and so precise, and it's always theatrical, and it's always incisive, and it's that type of writing that needs the time to actually breathe, to look at, to think about, and then to allow it to sort of live I say in space, but I mean to actually be heard and to think about it. And it was just kind of, for us, it was just remarkable to see. I know that you say that sometimes you came in and felt like you hadn't quite written enough, but you always had something. You always made some very interesting changes. And like I say, sometimes they were nuanced, and sometimes it wasn't a lot of material, but it was really precise, and it would change the trajectory of where we were going and what we're looking at. And I think I had a great time sort of mining through all of that material, and it seemed to me that the actors did as well. So
Yeah.
it was great. It was a really great time.
It was such an interesting. I think back to that workshop, even in the recent production, the rehearsal process, there were moments that I referenced things that happened in that workshop, because it was the first time that some of those scenes were spoken, right? So early versions. Well, although actually the monologue that the TT actor does, the Tim Teresa, where it's just both characters are housed within the same body. That monologue has not changed much since that read, that time. I mean, I'm sure I've changed the order of things or word choice, but overall it is the same. And I remember, I hope this is okay to reveal this, but I remember you telling me that, because I was writing, I think that one I wrote, and maybe I think that one was in the early draft that kicked off that workshop. And so the actors got it, they took a look at it, and Matt Boston, who's had that role, you told me that later that he kind of called or found you and said, I'm playing both Tim and Teresa. I'm like, yeah. And he said, and I'm having a conversation between those two characters in this monologue or this scene. And we were like, yeah, we're just gonna try it. And he was like flummoxed, like, how do we do that, right? And then I remember when rehearsal for that scene came up, he did, which is a very natural human and actor impulse, which is he moved a lot, you know, to try and be different characters. And I remember I said, well, actually, I think the best way is for you to just go straight on. And then when we did that, it was immediately, I mean, I felt like it was very legible. I mean, I'm also crazy.
Absolutely.
So.
No. Absolutely.
Because that really distracts, but then you can actually see what the actor's doing and they say straight. Okay, so.
And that scene, of course, just became, I mean, that's a scene that everyone who hears it or who sees it has always remarkable. They did it up there in Huntington, and then, of course, in the two productions, they always mentioned that particular scene. I mean, it's also very pivotal because it's also
That's right.
the first time when the play starts to go.
Right. It starts to the journey of the play, scenes 1 through 7, is establishing a lot, and you're already being taken along on a ride because the actors are doing this double.
Right.
But that's the first scene where it's like, oh, right. Remember they're doubling? Well, actually, that means a character can have a conversation with himself, you know, or an actor can have a conversation between two characters. So anyways, right. So from that experience, I mean, gosh, I was exhausted by the end of it, but it was the kind of exhausted where I was relieved at the end, because I had, generally speaking, as much as was conscious, I had gathered everything that I had, the impulses that were like eating away at me, the characters, the scenes, the ideas, the feelings, the emotions that were like, if I hadn't gotten it out, it might have taken 20 years, you know, because it was so intense, but it was so needed to come out. And thank God for that workshop. Thank God for you. Thank God for those actors who were game. Although one of those actors was do you remember? I mean, it's so much time, but
Well, I don't know that we need to.
Okay.
I mean, the point is that as exciting as playing those double roles are, it's also having to play a different gender and having to play
different
age,
generation.
different generation.
Yeah.
Sometimes takes a minute for someone
Of
to
course,
actually, get into it. So, there was that, but ultimately,
right.
it all came together, and it was just, and the excitement, that, I mean, I was aware that sort of every actor who looked at this play, and so as we saw over time, every actor who looked at it wanted to do it, because those roles, you don't get roles like this every day.
And I'll add to that, which is I found that, I would say most directors and most actors, when they read even just the character breakdown, were excited.
Right.
They could see it, they could visualize it, they started to imagine how to do it, and also lots of fear, like how do we do this, right?
Exactly.
But that the kind of fear where that's what made me become an actor kind of fear. That's what I was described to me.
Right.
So then, not all of them, but most. And then the people that were like intrigued and interested in the story, I kept hearing the words, I just can't quite get my mind around the character doubling. Those were people who, generally speaking, encounter a play on the page. Right. So, and it's not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of how you interact with the play. Because a lot of literary managers, producer types, they just were like, it's interesting, but I just can't get my mind around it. And what I ended up figuring out how to say is, well, you remember, how there's these one-person shows. And as soon as I said that, people were like, oh, right. And I'd say, and I'm not a huge fan of the one-person show, because I really enjoy seeing two human beings interact, two or more, right? So whenever I see one-person show, for the most part, I always think, yeah, but that was amazing. I respect, but wouldn't it be amazing for at least two people to be doing that? And then you're just always wondering who's going to pop out of the other act, you know. Anyways, so most of the actors that encountered this and directors were made excited and wanted to jump into a workshop. Then what I found was that, you know, there's a certain percentage who could do it. Listen, no judgment, because the people that didn't have that capacity, they simply don't have like a 70-year-old man, Italian man inside of them.
Yeah.
No judgment, right?
Right.
But, or didn't have a 65-year-old Irish American woman inside of them. Not everyone does, but then the people that were like truly like riveting, playing those roles, it's like this, right? And I'm fortunate that in these two productions, I was able to work with those actors that can do it.
Right.
So I feel so lucky that we were able to get those casts.
We also, at that time, we had a lot of discussion, or actually, it started there at Huntington, and then I think over the next few years when we were working with dramatists, but we constantly had that conversation about why is it that it's 3 actors playing 6 roles? So that what I was really interested in was, I loved how you sort of kind of approached it, was we didn't want this to be some sort of a device. It was really, what is it about this play? What is it about this world that we're constructing that allows for these characters to actually, these actors to play these 2 different characters, and these different characters to sort of show up in the play? And I think, and to some degree, I mean, in addition to exploring sort of, you know, genetically how we cast things on, how we cast things on culturally and socially, and, you know, how in the community we cast things on. You also connect, so if you recall, you said to me, this is early on, I guess we were at Huntington, and you said, this is not a play about psychosis. This is a play about how, when someone has a psychotic break, it affects everyone around.
Yes, so
you can restate how you said it was that, right?
To me, the story is about, or the play is about the experience of witnessing someone you love go through a psychotic episode. It is not about what it's like to go through a psychotic episode.
Right.
I know people are in the audience, you know, perhaps even the majority of the audience are going to think, oh, that's what it's like to be Tim, right? To have this mental illness. And that's just not true, but I can't control that. But I know that what I have done is, or what I committed to for myself, and I did to the best of my ability, is to have the audience experience what it's like to fall in love with a family, to fall in love with a play, and then see that family member, see that play that you think you know so well, that you recognize, go through something where they become unrecognizable and you don't understand what's going on. And that's what the play, for me, that's what it's about. That's what I wanted to, you know. So there's a lot of the scenes where the play has the psychosis episode. Those scenes, it's scenes 8 through 12, 5 scenes. You know, it's a lot of different experiences of cognitive dissonance, and that's by design.
Right.
I'm not trying to. It's not for any, you know, reason other than to allow you to experience what it is like in the beginning, where you think you know someone, and by the end of the scene, you realize something is going on, and then you think you know what's going on. So the first one being the Tim Teresa. So at first, you know, this is happening, and you might just be in a little bit of shock that this actor is having a conversation.
Right,
but it's actually the easiest on-ramp. right? Because we've seen,
Right.
and then by the end of it, you're like, okay, so this play has that capacity within it. We're gonna see more of that. And then the next scene is scene 9, where I call it the crisscross scene, because there are 2 actors, Tim Teresa and Von Daniela, and they're talking. I'm try the arms work this way. They're talking. Each character is talking to the other character.
That's right.
Housed within. Yeah.
That's right. And it's where we, so you would also say in explaining what the play is and what it is not, you also said, I also want the play to have a psychotic break.
That's right. Yes.
And so, and we see that in that,
Yes.
in that scene. And so part of what I'm tying this into why 3 actors and 6.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right,
Yes.
and 6 characters. I mean, in
Yes.
addition to all the other things we talk about genetically and culturally and all of that, but then it's also so that the play can now take this turn and just become
Right.
this really odd
Right.
Rubik's cube that we're
Right.
not quite sure where it's going. I mean, anyway, yeah, and that's what was so thrilling about it, was to say, oh my God, she actually did it. Had the play, and if you recall, do you remember how you wrote some of those scenes?
Oh my gosh, so many versions. Well, because, so what I want to express is also in some ways obliquely a reflection of mental health care, mental illness, and or rather the experience of witnessing mental illness and the healthcare system. So like the tools you have to navigate. And the experience is often, you think you understand what's happening. Okay. It's this person is maybe on the wrong medication, or this person was under a lot of stress and didn't get enough sleep. And so you think, okay, that's what we have to do. So then that's what we have to address. And so then you embark, you get maybe medical consultation, and then you embark on fixing it. And then as you're in the process, and it takes time to assemble the right medical personnel or the right location or the right whatever, and as you're in the process of putting that solution together, something happens and you realize the problem, that this situation has paradigmatically shifted. Like there's a new paradigm that you have to incorporate. And all these things that you're in the process of assembling are suddenly like, okay, new. Okay, now we have more information. Now we understand. We met the right doctor. And then over and over and over again, the paradigm shifts. And so because of that, for me, it was important to have, I came up with 5 scenes where you think you understand how the play is now going to operate. And then the scene ends and there's a little sense of like, okay, that was tough, but got there.
Right.
Then the next scene happens. And it has to still operate within the rules of the play. And the rule is that 2 characters are housed within each body.
Right.
That rule, it turns out, can get you a lot of different cognitive dissonance,
Exactly.
But you were asking me there's some of those things, like the crisscross scene. There were so many times when it was just Teresa and Daniela. And I thought, well, maybe the cognitive dissonance is that they're speaking at different times. So I think one iteration was Teresa is at the beginning, like, no, don't go take him to the hospital. And Daniela is at the end of it saying, and so this is what happened at the hospital.
Right.
And I tried that a number of times. And I held on to that because there was something interesting for me in that, but it just wasn't legible. And and I tried various iterations of it. I tried, maybe they're speaking at the same time, or I don't know. I can't remember.
All talking together.
Yes. There were so many crazy iterations and I think you directed various workshops of that. And each one you were like, okay, that was interesting. I found, and I dropped out here, or, I found it very hard. And it was very clear, like, this is not working. And it's clear more and more that messing with time in a time-based medium is very hard. It's very, and it's sort of like, it has to be worth it, you know?
Right.
And it has to be, you know, like you have to simplify many elements in order to make that work. And was it worth it? And was it the right thing? Ultimately, I think if it was the only thing in a one-act play or in a entire play, that was the entire thing. Oh, in fact, that's I know a musical that does. Then that's okay. If that's the one thing, then you can work at it. But if it's just one scene in a play that has many cognitive dissonance, then it's probably not worth it, because people are going to drop out and then they'll just be like, ooh, you know.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I did lots of iterations. of that.
And what it was also was the fact that we had the time to do that.
Yes.
That actually, sometimes when you didn't think you had something new, it was really interesting to play with all the different ways we played with it. Sometimes I mean, if you recall, I think you then took some scenes, you actually went to some later scenes and brought them in, and, you know, I mean, but we
I
had,
tried so many different.
we had the time to actually do all of that.
Yes.
So that you could learn,
Yes.
we could see what, you know, what was working, what wasn't, what was helpful, what, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, and generally speaking, for me, I have come to embrace that failure is my best teacher. It's emotionally difficult to be with this teacher, but it is for sure. You know, and that, you know, we did so many workshops with dramatists, with so many extremely talented actors and directors. And the things that I reference often in order to fix something in the play are the times that it didn't work or that there was a struggle, because that teaches you so much more than when, or it's a different kind of learning for the writing process, but it teaches you so much about what it can be legible, what needs a little bit of support in some way with the writing. And I have to say that so anyway, so I reference a lot of those.
And you're right, and that's one of the things that, of course, we talk about in drama, is that in fact that's what's important, and that's what we try to to make available and facilitate for everybody. Was again having 7 years to develop not only your work but also how you work. You know, sort of all the different ways stylistically that you may want to try to develop work. That's a really great thing, and I love the fact that you have taken that to heart. And I mean, the fact is that, you know, we did the workshop at Huntington. That was, I thought, was really successful. You got a great draft. That final reading, I mean, at some point we landed on sort of how to make the play actually have this psychotic break.
Right.
And the audience was like, what's going on? And then they were like, whoa, we got it. And the reaction after was just explosive, you know, as I recall.
Well, it's hard for me to.
It is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
it was essential for you to say that was very successful, because I just was like, okay.
Well, it wasn't, because the point was not to about success. The point was
right,
actually to give you the time and the space.
That's right.
You know what I mean? It was like, and you know, the fact that we had that time at Huntington to actually do it, and that the actors were so enthusiastic and so willing to just kind of throw themselves into the work was just, I mean, it was really amazing. And then to be able to come to New Dramatists, to have you work the way you work again, as precisely and as incisively that you work, and you know, sort of, I mean, I don't know if it was every 2 or 3 weeks, but I think Emily said 17. I counted 19. You?
So okay, so I have done a little math. Watch out. And I count. I had a grand total before the first production of workshops, both at New Dramatists and elsewhere, 56 days.
Wow.
Okay, now, and 7 reads before an audience. Okay. I had 17 workshops. My math corresponds with that. I
Oh,
had
okay.
17 1- or 2-day workshops
Right.
at New Dramatists. But if you count the number of days at New Dramatists, it's 24.
Right, okay, yes, because some were 2 days.
Yes, yes.
And it was almost always different casts, right?
Yes, I mean, there were some that, some actors came a
Right.
number of times, but generally speaking, I did not have a chance to tabulate all the number of actors. I think I came up with, I think there were somewhere between 9 to 11 different directors that I worked with.
Right.
But actors, I don't have that number.
Well, 17 times 3, like, roughly.
Roughly, yeah. I
Right,
mean, it
right.
was a lot, and it
Close
was,
to 60,
and I
50,
learned from
45,
every single one of them. But as I said, you know, sometimes the actors that had the most questions or struggled the most taught me the most. Because, you know, I feel like a playwriting teacher told me once, you know, yes, of course you want to work with great actors, but they're not going to help you figure out what's not working, or they might, but because they might be asking the right questions, etc. But the people that will help you figure out what's not working are the people that aren't going to be able to cover for the mistakes that are inherent in the writing. So you want to be able to see what you have, you know?
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so the heavy workshop periods at New Dramatists were in 2016 and 2017, and I had 16 workshop days in 2016, 17 workshop days in 2017. And I you know, it's funny because it was sort of fun to put together these numbers, and now I want to know exactly how many actors I've worked with and stuff. And the question is, you know, did I need all of those days? Did I need to work with all those actors, all those directors? And for me, the answer is absolutely yes and no. Meaning it's impossible to know. Maybe it could have been half of that. All I know, you know, it's so funny because so often people are trying to be really efficient and linear about creativity, and including me. Like, I want to know. I want to be able to, you know, parse my time exactly right so that I can maximize and all those productivity ideas. And I find that even though I have that impulse, it is impossible to know.
Well, that's right. Well, one of the things I knew about you before we, you know, before working together on Catch, was that, in fact, I think you're always thinking about your work, so that you had already had productions of You for Me for You, and you would come back and then do workshops. You just did kind of tweak things and, you know, keep develop. And you sometimes did it before a second or third production, which I just thought was really amazing. Which was, of course, I felt like you also use New Dramatists in the way that we ask you to. We ask, what we say is, we offer you 7-year residencies free of charge to basically spend the time looking at your work, thinking about it, exploring it, finding ways, different ways to sort of approach it. And the point is that we ask you to run your artistic process, as Emily mentioned. So you're running it, and what you did was you always thought, okay, well, I can actually come back. There were things that I needed to look at again for me, for you. And so when you were this, not microscopic, but when you were this focused on Catch, it was really exciting to see all those different workshops, because they never felt like a waste of time, ever. Some of them I directed, many of them I didn't, most of them at that point was we writing other directors, but it was never a waste of time. It was always something, like you say, that you were learning, some new thing that you were sort of figuring out, and also learning what was working, what wasn't working, what was really important to keep in. Because the piece is it's not an easy piece. It's a really exciting theatrical. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, we love about it is the theatricality of it, and it's difficult to know what is right and what is wrong, and when is it that this is what it wants to be, And, and so you used your time, I felt really wisely here and leaned on what those resources are. The resources are wonderful collaborators, the building.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, time and space. And and the network, right? The thing is that, I don't think I revealed this at the time, but there were definitely at least one or two of these workshops where I put a date on the calendar. I nabbed some time and space with you and promised that I would have a new version of this scene or that, whatever. And I didn't, for whatever reason. And I would show up and I'd feel terrible that but I needed the workshop. I needed the time to just kind of stay in the world of the play, to revisit it again and to encounter it. Sometimes you just want it to still exist.
Right.
And then other times you want it to exist, but also show you something new. And that every time, every workshop. But I call you the Godfather, the guardian angel.
You're very generous.
But you have but I think I figured out yesterday what the real term should be, which is you're the delivery doctor. Because you delivered the first draft.
Well, you delivered the first draft.
Well, okay, see, this is exactly why this is why this is so important. But you were crucial. And it's a remarkable gift to have someone I can't even describe it, to have someone who I can have a collegial conversation about this play on so many aspects of it, casting, design, the script over a period of time. Because there were so many times, the way I sort of think about it is what happened so often at the Huntington, those 2 weeks, is I would come and I'd be like, this is what I got. And you'd be like, all right, let's pour a little water on, let the sun shine. And I'd see like a little bit of growth, right? And I kept happening. I'd keep coming. I just like feeling like I just spent like 10 days in the desert, right? And then but then, by the end, I somehow it grew into a draft, right? Well, that process, that emotional journey of like feeling like, and then happened over and over again over the course of those, whatever it is, like 3 or 4 years. I mean, still, right? Because there were times, especially that one scene that I could not figure out, what I now call whisper scene. I figured that out, by the way. I've learned. I figured that out in April 2018. So it took a lot of failure for the preceding.
I don't think it was all failure. It just took a lot of
well by the time
testing.
Yes.
Trying.
Well, right. Because by the time April 2018, when I figured it out, I knew I had gotten it right. You know what I mean? Because I knew so much failure before that. But anyways, but throughout the process of the last few years, I absolutely would every now and then just show up at your office door and mention this, that, and the other, and then intuitively sometimes I would just be like, and I'd probably show up with the same sort of like expression, and then you would just pour a little water, remind me of certain things. It was really, I don't know, like with this play, it feels like every ounce of effort or every moment that I had with trusted collaborators, just like in a production where you're just like trying to get to and then you get there, it feels like you not a second less. You could not have done it without every single moment and every single But no, it's true.
It's
I
very,
really
very
feel like it
intense,
was an intense, it's been an intense.
Well, yeah, it was, but it's also, that's also what we wrote. That's what was so exciting. You know, I mean, like I say, who wants to work on a play that you can say, okay, go home, learn the lines, and come back on stage and go out? You know what I mean? I mean, the things that are exciting are, wow, this is really exciting to me, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. I have no idea how I'm going to do it. Those are the types of projects that are really exciting. And this, you know, catch a sketch. I mean, we, as I recall over the years, not only were we a lot of character stuff, but sort of talking also about how do you make some of these transitions? I mean, it's, you know what I mean? We had some of those conversations, and not that we necessarily figured them out, but we've now had 2 great productions where,
Yes.
you know, with those 2 directors actually, and together with you, I hope to sort of figure out what those are. But
so yeah, something I often think and say is it's a remarkable thing when you throw a ball and someone knows how to catch it. And I have encountered a number of people who have known how to catch it. Starting with you. But truly, and again, I learn a lot from the people that don't quite know how to catch it or fumble the ball or whatever. But when it comes to production time, you kind of are like, okay, well, we actually, those that know how to catch it, let's go with those. So, so the first production in fall 2018, produced by Page 73 at the New Ohio Theater, directed by Ken Rushmall. Ken. And also with a brilliant cast. I want to do it in alphabetical order. Jeff Beal, Michael Esper, Janine Saras. And those designers. That creative team knew how to catch the ball. And then, of course, this past fall, 2022, post-pandemic, we've all changed. And amazingly, found another creative team that absolutely knew how to catch it. And with a twist or a new paradigm, which is I wanted to do an Asian American cast. Now, I didn't have a chance to figure out exactly which one of these new dramatist workshops, but I actually did have the impulse to have an Asian American cast for this play well before there was any production on the horizon. And we did do a workshop, which was awesome. But I do believe that the play can have equally a white cast and an Asian American cast. They're going to be different journeys, but the story destination remains the same. And then, you know, it's just, they're very different experiences as an audience with regard to race, with regard to performance, etc. But again, that is true with any cast, meaning you can have 5 different casts that are all white and it will be a different journey, right? With any play. But yes, okay, so the Asian American cast is a different thing. And the thing about these 2 productions I want to convey is that even though we tend to think of progression as linear, so things go from, you know, first to second there is a correction or an improvement. And in this case, I would say they are just different. They're both excellent productions. I was incredibly lucky to have both brilliant directors, brilliant casts. And it's kind of like, you know, there are some things that I preferred in one production over another. You know, each of them, it's kind of like, you know, with someone you love, are they perfect? No. But would you change them? Well, if you love them, no. I mean, you might try to inspire them to change. But really, you know, these productions were each like, you know, I feel like they're like, you know, related, like they're my family.
Right.
And they were astounding, both of them, for totally different ways, and in some ways that overlapped. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky.
Well, you should, and of course that also is a reflection of the play. I mean, that's the thing that's, you know, when you have a really remarkable, interesting play, it's not going to be as good. A different team is going to find different information from the play.
That's
going
right.
to highlight
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's so always exciting, and that's what I think that's what keeps things living and keeps them moving,
Yeah.
right? Because of that, and so
Yeah.
I mean, it was really exciting to see both productions. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And you know, and here we are.
And here we are. Yeah, no, it feels very, oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm loving this. I don't want to stop the momentum, but I do want to, there's a question that came up and we're ready for it, and there might be some other questions, but keep the momentum. But could you just say a little bit, could you give a brief synopsis of the play? I think that like we heard about some of the themes and the way it works. Could you just give like
Okay.
a brief synopsis? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I'm suddenly aware that there have been a lot of spoilers in this conversation. I just kind of assumed that we, but
I did too.
Yeah.
The people knew the play, yeah.
well, yeah, okay, that's okay, that's okay. The play is about two working class families in New England, an Italian-American family and an Irish-American family. That, the way I describe it, when I'm trying to protect the reveals, is that they're grappling with a shifting crisis. And that's also with regard to the writing process. Part of it was I was dealing with this issue. A shifting crisis. So what I wanted to do was write each scene has a new crisis, okay? In part because I have a large family, and at all times there is a crisis, at least one. Sometimes there's a profusion of crises, but since this play is so much about family, that felt like the right, anyways, that was how I decided to get the play pages out, right? That each scene, what's the crisis, right? And then the play, because there have been so many spoilers, I might as well just say, the play, what you deal with is in the first scene, the crisis is that Teresa's son, Tim, is engaged to an Asian American woman, a Korean American woman. And it's a crisis. It's something to, it's not entirely like a negative crisis, but it's something to sort out, you know, figure out, and you know, so a confront. And then in the second scene, it's a scene between Roberta Lavecchia and Lon Lavecchia. And it starts off saying, you know, something's wrong with Robbie. So Roberta's son, Robbie. But to me, the crisis of the scene, this is where I launch the slow burn crisis of slowly declining health of Ron. But there are other crises that get mentioned, but that to me is really, it's about Ron, because it's a scene about preparing for the doctor's visit. And then in the third scene, we've encountered all three of the parents by this point. Third scene, we encounter their progeny, Tim, Daniela, and Robbie. And that's just a profusion of crises, because each of them, and to me, it's also crises that are talked about, and then ones that are being kept secret, but we are aware of them in some way. And then crises that are being lied about, you know, or covered up. But there's lots of, they're just that they're a certain age in life where some doors seem to be closing, some doors they're trying to open, you know, keep open, and they're having a lot of anxiety about it. But it's a fun scene because they know each other well and love each other. Anyway, so each scene, and it kind of proceeds from there. But the crisis, one of the things I wanted to address is that, so we all, in a family, complex family, there's always a crisis, at least one. And then you just find more and more crises, and then they shift, you know, someone does something like breaks up with her boyfriend, who's about to be her fiance, breaks, dumps him, that becomes its own crisis, At any rate, but the crisis of mental illness will just steamroller over all those crises. It is the loudest crisis, generally speaking, when it appears, all the other crises just get silenced, or just it pulls focus, is what I would say. But it pulls focus when it's when it's very acute, and then it's very acute. But then when it gets to some place of stability, time has passed, and those other crises have continued to evolve, and then they take over and life carries on. And then the mental illness crisis is when it's not acute, it becomes a slow burn crisis, or a daily mountain that you have to climb every single day, right? Or that's how I would depict it. There are many ways to describe it, but I'm certainly not have never wanted to say that this play tells you exactly what there is to know about mental illness, because like anything else, it's as various as the people, the individuals. So is that enough of a synopsis? No?
Thank you. I think so. Audience, you can let me know. Can I start collecting other questions? Are you cool with that? Because it's about 4:10. This is fascinating and so lively and so fascinating. It's such a great insight into your process and about this project. So audience, please go ahead and populate. There's a Q&A function where you can put your questions and I'll grab them. Oh yeah, so yes, from the audience, the synopsis was great. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I can see their answers and questions. So if other people have any other questions, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A, or in the chat is fine as well. I think you've answered every question possible. Okay, no questions so far. So carry on. Do you have a sort of next steps? I mean, I just wanted to interject, because when you did bring up You for Me for You, which a play I also love, and I will say that one of the things in watching how you developed that play at New Dramatists was really imparted for me how production is play development. Like that was so clear what you learn. So I guess I'm throwing out my own question is sort of, will you continue to work on Catch? Is it finished for you? Will it move on into other production situations? And maybe you don't have all the answers, but I'm just curious.
Well, I hope it gets another production. And will I keep working on it? Well, the answer is yes. It's basically there. So the thing about You for Me for You is that I had to, it got produced twice. The same draft got produced twice, and it wasn't, it did not fulfill the mission, that draft. So I couldn't let it get produced again. I actually refused other production offers because I just it just felt like, it feels wrong somehow to let all these people and money get expended on something that does not fulfill the mission. It's failure to launch, right? Or for me. So because the point of that play is to draw us closer to the North Korean perspective as much as I can imagine, right? And that draft just made the sister who makes it to the United States. So it's about two North Korean sisters who are fleeing North Korea. So in that draft, it's magic realism, just so you know. That sister that gets to the United States, those scenes were infinitely more interesting in that draft than the North Korean scenes, the scenes of the North Korean sister who got stuck. So, even though many people, and I think including you, Emily, were like, it might be time to move on to another play. Sometimes people revise plays by writing new plays. And I was like, these are all wise words. But I really felt that I wasn't clear that I was a playwright if I couldn't figure this play out, you know? So I just went in there. It's like I put it in the new dramatist garage, and I took the car all the way apart, and like the overall idea that it was a car kept that, but how it functioned, how the engine, where the engine was, etc. I would say at least half, maybe 2/3 of the play got wholly rewritten. I mean, maybe the scenes were, I knew the point of the scene, but the scene was totally new, but the point was the same, you know, that kind of thing. And luckily, that draft then got circulated, and that luckily that got a production, you know, fairly, well, totally distinguished production in London at the Royal Court, which then allowed it to have another life, you know, because then people paid attention to that, and then it got various regional productions in the United States, which is amazing, and really like I'm so grateful for.
Thank you.
But that helped me say, okay, I was able to fulfill that mission. I mean, to some extent, I mean, I could probably still work on it. But anyways, this play, it is largely there, but there are two revision challenges that I have ahead of me, which is after working with two brilliant creative teams, there are one or two, actually more like 3 or 4 scenes that I either need to look at internally, like some of the dynamics of the scene between the characters, the journey, or the notation that I have for the scene needs to be maybe less, I mean, some of the scenes I just don't include any, I certainly don't tell how to do it, because I don't want to, you know, I'm not an actor or director, and I don't want to at all stifle that creativity, which is what is so brilliant about theater. Like the play is an invitation for people to bring their imaginations, their backgrounds, their histories, their insights, and bring something to life. And they do that. Every performance can be different, depending on what happened during the day, you know. So that's what I love about theater. However, after 2 brilliant productions, there are a few scenes that I think, all right, let me just add a few like thoughts about what, you know, to get us to get here, so that then your imaginations can focus on how best to do this. There, yeah, I think there's a few, some notation that I need to add.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I never think notations are a bad thing, actually.
Well, that's good. Well, then I'll consult you when I.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, I think, because sometimes it's important to actually be
No, I
clear
know.
about what,
I
you know.
But it's amazing, like, it's kind of amazing, you know, I've said this a number of times, but I feel like I became a playwright so I could be in rehearsal, because I love rehearsal so much. And I love it when you have written something and you have a very clear idea and you've enacted it, and you're, you know, wherever you write, you know, in my apartment. And then it comes out totally differently from the actor, or it gets set up totally differently by the director. And sometimes I have to say, well, actually, you know, like, here's the starting premise that is crucial. But sometimes things come up that I are surprising and delightful, and very rarely do they actually change the story. And if it changes it in a way that's not productive for the overall, then I have to say something. But overall, I mean, it's really amazing when stuff happens that is not out of alignment.
Sure.
I have two questions came up in the Q&A. One is, hi Peggy, it's from Peggy Scott. I think this was going back to Catch as Catch Can, I believe. But she was curious to know if, have you collaborated like this on previous projects? Was that a typical process, which I think you addressed a little bit, like the way you worked on You for Me for You. You did work incrementally too, but there were some different questions. But I guess she was curious to know, like, had you worked this way before, collaborated like that, and is that your typical process, the way you worked on Catch, I think is what she was asking.
Yeah, I mean, so much of my New Dramatist residency, the 7 years, right? I keep thinking that it's 8 years. Maybe I'm like angling for another.
There we go.
No, so much of that was actually identifying or piecing together what my process is. And I'm still, there's probably still things that will develop that I'll realize like, oh, that is my process, the process changes per project for sure, I think. I have a musical or music theater piece that I'm developing, whole new process because the composer is such an integral part, but what I can say, what's probably pretty clear to me, at least now, is that revision is a huge tool for me, because as I said, I need to be able to fail multiple times and get comfortable with that. Because every failure is a little different, it falls down a little bit differently and it teaches you something about the play or the character or the whatever. And so I also am the kind of person that I need to see, I might know what the point of a scene is, or I might know I have to have a scene, I don't know, I have to have a scene where a son and a mother have a conversation and they just keep missing each other. But I might not know, I might have 10 different ways to do that. And so for me, I tend to want to try each one. I mean, if I have 10, I maybe get to 5, and then I learn enough and I'm like, oh, 6 through 10, no need to do that. But at the time, this is generally speaking in my life, I have a very hard time deciding people always say, well, listen to your instincts, listen to your impulses. Well, what if you have multiple instincts and impulses, which is often the case with me. And then then it's a process of just weeding things down. And so, and you learn through, and nothing is wasted. That's another thing that I often remind myself and others, like nothing is wasted, because, and sometimes the thing that seems like the most likely waste of time teaches you a ton, because you just have to put some of your preconceptions to the side and do something that seems, like lunacy.
That's fantastic. And this is actually a related question from a different attendee. So I think this speaks a little bit to that instinct, but when do you feel it's time for another workshop or reading? And can you give a project too much or not enough rest time? Like sort of, how do you negotiate those?
Interesting question.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so I've certainly experienced workshops where it was too soon, like I hadn't let things percolate it long enough. But again, nothing is wasted. I feel like it just sort of depends. The thing is, the reason Dramatist was critical for this, and probably critical for any play, frankly, is that you can have a workshop day where you don't have a reading at the end of it. You can focus on one page. You can focus on just talking about the themes of the play. And again, nothing is wasted. All of that is important to my process. Now, obviously, I value workshops with other entities, different, like the Huntington, et cetera, and generally speaking, it's just kind of, the process generally is, we'll give you space, time, stage manager structure, and then actors, director, and that's all amazing. And generally speaking, not always, but generally, there's a reading at the end. And that can be a very useful thing, for sure. But you have a different mindset with that. You have a different allowance and patience with yourself with that, And I do think that's why New Dramatists, for me, has been critical, because I am someone who wants to, my impulse is often like, okay, so I'm getting these resources and they want this at the end of it. I want to fulfill that mission, and I also think that it's right and good to fulfill the mission sometimes, because you learn a lot from that process. But there are times when I just really need to get out of my own way and just do whatever, whatever process I need. And, I think we had a workshop. I had one workshop with Ken Preston-Lindsay. I was looking at my record, where we had maybe 3 or 4 hours of workshop with actors. And then I don't remember how or who decided this, but we ended it. And then Ken Preston-Lindsay and I, for several hours, according to my calendar, sat and just talked about the play. And he gave me a lot of feedback, etc. And I have to say, that's what the play needed at the time. That's what I needed at the time. You can create those opportunities for yourself, especially if you have an awareness of that, which I probably wouldn't have known. But before that, but it's just, that's why New Dramatists really is pretty singular. I've heard of 1 or 2 other places where they'll give you a week and there's no, reading. You can have a reading or you don't have to. I always have to say that. But a place where it's almost like you're going to an idealized workspace, like your own. It's like your ideal writing office for the day. That's unusual, and it's singular. I don't know that there's really any other place that does that, frankly, where you don't feel somehow like, have I been wasting resources? Maybe I should be that. But I never felt that way. I mean, longer than, a passing moment.
Right. No, that's right. But that's exactly what New Dramatists is actually offering you the time and the space to, 7 years is a lot of time.
It's a lot.
And it's and the invitation is so that hopefully you'll actually understand that, in fact, nothing is considered a waste of time, that it's all part of the creative process. And, we're here to help facilitate that and to, sort of encourage you to just keep doing what you're doing and keep, moving forward with your work.
Yes. And I should also mention, and finding collaborators, that was crucial for me, because I really didn't have I don't think, a very typical development as a playwright in theater. I didn't have a posse or I did, finding my people, that was through New Dramatists, for sure. Especially directors. And I haven't mentioned yet, just because of the way the conversation has moved. But in fact, finding Daniel Ocken for this Playwrights Horizons production, it was crucial to be able to have a day of workshop. Not on this play, in fact, at New Dramatists. So, often you just, so how do you find a director? Like, that was always a question. And, there are various opportunities, different workshops and things. But if you found the director that you need for a project, and then you kind of want to have time with them, and so you have me. But then, what about a different project? Or what if a director is not available? Like, so I was constantly trying to figure out and each project needs a new director. Blah blah blah. Okay, so. Daniel Ocken was recommended to me by people. And so, usually you go see their work. And then, often sometimes it's like, go have a coffee with them. But, that can only tell you so much, frankly. So being in a rehearsal room, engaged in a project and having a creative conversation around that, that's what you need to know. I mean, or at least that's a big chunk of what you need to know. A bigger chunk is actually going through a production with a person, right? But a big chunk is in a rehearsal, even just for, I think it was 5 or 6 hours, maybe. So he had been recommended to me, this is way back, pre-pandemic. And I have a play that's still in progress called This Exquisite Corpse that I've workshopped a number of times at New Dramatists. Nothing wasted there, but it's still.
I think that has its own folder too, but anyway.
Yeah. But so yeah, better. But I was able to do, actually, it was a one-day alumni workshop with Daniel in 2019, and on This Exquisite Corpse, and it was a great workshop. It was a one day, and we, based on that, then I felt comfortable. Then we had some weird Zoom workshop for a totally different project during the pandemic. But then when the Catch As Catch Can production opportunity arose at Playwrights Horizons, the person I wanted to work with was Daniel. And luckily, he had not seen the fall 2018 production, because otherwise, as he tells me, he would never have taken on the project. Which I can understand. I just would say that he's another person that knew how to catch the ball, catch as catch can, and brilliantly so.
That's great. I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna wrap this up. We went over, but this was fascinating. You both were so generous with your time and sharing this collaboration, this process on this play, and so many insights and just this sort of remarkable ways that very simple resources, like you've said several times, the time, the space, an amazing array of actors and directors, and your ongoing conversations, really brought this play into being. And one of the things that I feel like, this sort of way that the importance of knowing what doesn't work, and you've mentioned this many times, Mia, that's something then you're like, I know that doesn't work, as opposed to sort of saying, I'm not sure if this works, but I don't have time to actually explore it, so I'm just going to make those kind of unilateral decisions about a process. That's really what time allows, is you to say, I'm just going to go for it, and okay,
Yeah.
It doesn't work, but now I know that, as opposed to something you kind of judiciously decide. So I really appreciate all you really bringing all of that into the room around your work, and really
And I also want to mention each of the actors, except one in the Page 73 production, but in this most recent production, Cindy Chung, John Norman Schneider, and Rob Yang, I have workshopped things with them at New Dramatists, totally different things. But it's weird. I haven't spent a ton of time with all of them. Actually, the person I probably workshop the most with is John Norman, but in at New Dramatists. But yeah, but it was crucial to be able to encounter these actors at New Dramatists. You just don't get that opportunity, and I don't know. Sorry, I just suddenly felt like I needed to mention that it's you know, with New Dramatists, it's all about investment, because it's not about like you have this day of workshop and then you cast the person and boom, you know, you get to know someone, you know, and sometimes it's for 4 hours, and then you have that email, and then when you're going to cast something, you know, this past year I had Rob's email and was able to get the script to him, or well, it was through Dick, but anyways. So, but you know, it's that came from doing workshops, and I have a whole number of actor emails and director emails, dramaturg emails from New Dramatists. So, just another little plug.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm gonna, on that note, I want to thank you both very much for your time and insights. I also want to thank the team who made this event happen today, this beautiful room, and bringing these people together. New Dramatist staff members Tyler Christie, Alex Moon, Andrea Hebler, and Sophie Wasserman Smith. And I want to thank the webinar audience for spending the afternoon with us. And I want to wish you all good health and happy holidays. So thank you, Mia. Thank you, John. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler,
Thank you, Tyler.
Alex, etc.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
All right.
Right.
Bye.